It's the Drupal usability and UX call for Tuesday, the 5th of June, 2018. We will be discussing media, I think, and
Yes,
anything else that come up. We'll probably have a little retrospective on what we discussed at Frontend United last week. And I think, so Sam, tell us what you want to.
Yeah, so in that main media library issue, I'm just kind of like waiting on direction of what the UX team would like to see implemented.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering what the status of that is, and if maybe there can be an issue update if there was any decisions last week, because then I can get on implementing whatever new mockups there are, if there are any. So.
Yeah, I was starting to get a little bit. I was starting to get a little bit antsy about it on account of the fact that this is the first of 3 issues that are 8.6 targets, each of which blocks the last one. So this is starting to become a little bit urgent.
Sharing screen. Christina's sharing screen. Quickly.
Yay! Thank you, Christina. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So I think. I mean, yeah. My understanding is that the last thing I heard about was that like the select all checkbox is sort of like, oh, should be a checkbox, should be a button. I don't know if there was any decision made on that. If there was, then we haven't seen it in the issue.
No, you definitely haven't had a decision from us. I think what Christina has on her screen right now is what we discussed together. So I think that's what we want to propose. So let's have a look.
Yeah. Mainly where the things that we changed was the removing the button and to keep the same pattern that we have on the table and add the select all here. To keep this button as it goes at the beginning and just not do anything on the bulk operation. Well, the form, sorry, the filters that we have here. And about the grid itself, changing the color from the region that we have under the title from black to white. So it is more 7 related. The style is more kind of 7. And also make the title blue because it's a green. It's a link. And I don't know, I don't think there is anything else apart from that. Sorry, yeah. The title is cropped until you get over the title with the mouse, not on touch screens. I'm not sure what's the best pattern. I would say the same in touch screens. The first click, and then the second the link. And I don't know if there's any other change.
2 questions come up for me for that. One, Sam, is it possible to do that thing where it like cuts off with an ellipsis if it's too long in CSS?
Yes.
Okay, I'd never seen that before, so it's just like, okay. My second thing. Sorry, go ahead.
It's not perfect, but it works. It's an overflow behavior. Okay,
that sounds reasonable to me. My other question is for Christina, where I see you're accounting for a very long title, in that hover right there.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you have a title the length of War and Peace, and it's really going to overflow? Like, should the overflow limit just be like the height of the box, and then beyond that, it just unconditionally cuts off an ellipsis, or should it only ever come up to about half of the box?
So you mean that where's the limit here?
Right, where's the limit?
I would say where it gets over, so it doesn't make sense because you just get lost the checkbox. So I don't know, something like that. I'm not really sure how many lines we can have here. I haven't even checked the limit, but I can upload the screenshot now when we finish the call with this limit here. But I would
Okay.
leave that.
Yeah, it should simply just never hide overlap the checkbox, but it would grow as needed up to not covering the checkbox.
Okay, so always selectable, and that's that. And okay, I just wanted to clarify that because that's the kind of thing that could stymie this even further. Okay, so yeah, I guess that looks good to me. I'm happy with it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sorry for the backshedding, changing things. We just had to get in the same page.
Bike shedding in Drupal? Never. Scandalous. That's never happened.
Okay, so I will upload it later when we finish the call. I'm sorry for not getting time before that.
And is there any issue with that select all checkbox? Is that doable? I discussed with Christina, and I figured we'd rather not add more stuff to those crappy filters on top. So I was just trying to leave those alone and keep the select all behavior, well, not necessarily part of the grid, but not as part of the filters.
Yeah, we actually already have the code for this. It was in a previous patch, so I'll just kind of like do surgery and move it back, and it should be okay. Andrew kind of conceded that it's okay accessibility wise. He did have concerns about this like title hover behavior, which he posted in the issue, but we just have to try to do our best there. Have him do another accessibility review since it's a new thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, especially with because we don't have hover on touch, right? So we need to.
Yeah, we could think about it. I mean, there's different JavaScript events for like presses, touches, so we can do something there. But it's very complicated. So we'll just have to make a decision and have a review again.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So.
And what Christina told me last week, and what I did not realize, is that it sounds like you've already made a difference in how this behaves depending on how you arrive at it, so that when you are at a field in a content entry form, this whole linking to the item is not provided. Is that correct?
Yeah, so in the field widget issue, which I'll post in a second, it's another view display, which means we can kind of like change things in the view. For example, the bulk operations aren't there because you shouldn't be in context. And but the checkbox behavior is the same. The select all checkbox is removed because again, like you probably that doesn't. And then what we do is if you click an outgoing link, it prompts you and it says, hey, you're about to leave. Because, I mean, there are cases where maybe you want to leave the node form. But yeah, so we basically prevent it and show an alert. So
I was happy to hear that. So, sounds good. Sounds good.
Someone brought that up very early. It was like the first thing. So
nice. Yeah, so Christina and I arrived at this latest proposal together. So as she said, she'll post it later, and barring any other questions, remarks, feedbacks, but that would at least be the visual and behavioral design we'd aim to see implemented. So. Hope it all works.
Yep. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Cool.
Okay. So.
I think Clara had an issue, but I'm not sure if she's
joining
or. Well, Anja, I'm not sure.
I'll check. Hmm.
Otherwise, we can just make an update for last week.
Yeah.
We discussed. Okay.
I know WebChick is good in cohesive on the fly rambling. Maybe we can trick her into one of those.
You want an update from the JavaScript killing time situation, or what is our situation? Sorry, I had to run and get something.
A recap of Frontend United. So merging the admin and JavaScript.
Sure. Yep. So we had a last week at Frontend United. There was probably like 10 or so people there, including the people in the JavaScript initiative, which would be like myself, Matt Grill, and Sally Young. People in the admin UI initiative, which are Christina and Roy. Alex Pott as a backend framework manager. Lowry as a front end framework manager for core. His coworkers, Volkirk was in there too from the Thunder distribution. So kind of like end users, so who kind of flitted in and out as well throughout the week. And our goal with that sprint was to kind of come away from with an idea to build that would both kind of ramp Drupal's admin interface and usability, as well as utilize the best of the best stuff from React and kind of how we're going to get there. We also had some goals to like really drill in on some gnarly architectural issues that are kind of prevalent when you are trying to combine like a decoupled front end with a back end that's highly dynamic and that kind of stuff. And then the third pillar of that, I guess, was also getting an update from the admin UI initiative and what's all going on there. So coming out of that, that we with kind of a revamp in direction. Previously, what the JavaScript modernization initiative was trying to do, more or less as a proof of concept, just the use case and stuff, was kind of create a decoupled backend for Drupal that replicates everything under admin/star properly together.
Angie?
And that was that we made a lot of progress on that. That still exists. Even solving some, you don't yet have a Reactified UI for something like, say, the Views UI. We're not going to get that Reactified in 5 minutes.
Yeah. Angie.
Shoot. I'll try killing my video, but I'm literally in my living room and my router's right there. So there's not a lot.
Exactly, yeah.
I have firsthand experience with Canadian internet. It's a piece of shit.
Yep.
Just FYI, it's a countrywide issue.
Yeah. So anybody else. So that's really good. You know, it's shitty and it costs a lot. So we have both of those advantages going for us. But at any rate, so we came out of the kind of, rather than going that approach of trying to, revamp the whole entirety of the admin UI, really honing in on the content authoring experience instead. Because when we hear people complain that Drupal's really hard to use, they frequently are not complaining about admin/setting/performance or whatever. They're complaining about, creating content, getting images into Drupal, all of these kinds of problems that we're currently trying to solve. So making that experience really nice would be really, really helpful. Better align the efforts of the admin UI and the JavaScript initiative. We decided to combine those two into one. So it's now the admin UI and JavaScript modernization effort, which is pretty fun. And they're going to kind of go at this in a few stages because we don't want to rip the Band-Aid off for everyone all at once. And so how this is going to work is the teams will work in parallel. So admin UI team is working on a kind of a revamped styling for those backend forms, which we're still going to have. like admin performance or, these kinds of ones, and kind of revamping it with a better style guide that's sort of more modern and reflects modern design practices and accessibility and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of like a first pass. It's just kind of like a reskin of the existing 7 theme. At the same time, running along parallel of that, doing some really great ideation around what a next gen, quote unquote, admin UI could look like. So if you look at, say, Gutenberg from WordPress, which is shipping in WordPress 5, whenever that comes out, you look at Squarespace, you look at Adobe CQ5, like all these different competitors have really gone above and beyond like getting things in front of content authors that look and feel like the content that they're going to actually create, rather than being kind of like this where you're off on a form somewhere that changes something somewhere, but you don't really know until the last minute. Like that kind of stuff is not working very well. So Christina has some funding from her company, Yimbra. How do you pronounce your company's name? Yimbra?
Yimbra, yes.
Yimbra, okay. To kind of really drill in on this and kind of come up with a vision for a revamped content authoring experience for Drupal that does not remove all the advantages you get of Drupal, like the structured content aspects and the fact that you can create content that's used anywhere, not just on a web page, that kind of stuff. So she's going to be running along parallel doing design work around that. We'll also have some usability lined up with content authors to try and validate that work. So that's all going to be happening on the design side of things. And then on the implementation side of things, in lieu of having designs to work with, we're going to build using Material UI components, which is a standard set of React components that looks a lot like Google's UI, and build out the content overview page first of all, because that can consume JSON API. We can use some fancy React tricks like sorting or filtering the table with no page refresh, that kind of stuff. And then a much better version of the current node form that has, like, for example, drag and drop file uploads. And if we get the media library in there, then we would, make that all nice and swishy-wishy with the JavaScript stuff. I don't know. We'd also demo features like auto-saving, stuff that we kind of get for free, more or less, with a JavaScript framework like React. So our goal would be by Drupal Europe, which is in the second week of September, that we would have a nice demo to show that says, here's what React and Drupal can do together. It looks really nice because we're using these Reactified Material UI components instead of like what Nashville looked like. And then finally, here's the next visionary thing that Christina's working on that we're going to build towards after that. And so that is kind of like the vision of where we're going with this. On the architecture side of things, we came up with, we kind of circled the drain on a number of different topics. And it kind of comes down to the two needs of like JavaScript developers and site builders. So for JavaScript developers, what we want to do is use as much of the tools and practices and workflows and all that kind of stuff that they know. So that's very easy for someone who knows JavaScript really well and doesn't know anything about Drupal to kind of jump in and work on Drupal, because there are vastly more JavaScript developers than there are Drupal developers in the world. We want them to have an easy pathway. So that means using tools like NPM, working on GitHub. That means all these other kinds of, connotations. At the same time, one of the big strengths of, really the strength of Drupal is that technical people, the ability to just click around in an interface and make changes to their site without having to know any code. So we don't want to negate those benefits. And if anything, those benefits are kind of worth, quote unquote, more to us than the JavaScript developer benefits, because it remains to be seen whether massive JavaScript developers. We definitely know that all the users of Drupal today use it because of that, ability to click together something in the UI and have it do a thing. And so we went around quite a bit on like how to balance those, because like a typical React application is just a static application. There are no extension points in your use case, and that is what it does. Versus Drupal, it lets you be flexible to a fault sometimes, where like you get the form or a page or whatever that you can modify down to the what tag should be around this button and what label should the button read and all of that. And it's sort of like this balancing act, because the more and more Drupal we make something, the more and more like, what the hell is this? It is to a JavaScript developer. And the more we're just reinventing Drupal in JavaScript, which was never anybody's goal. But at the same time, if we remove all flexibility, then it's like, why are we doing this anyway? Like, if I can't turn on a module and have it affect something in the admin UI, action. So we kind of landed in a middle ground there with the approach where we're going to create a more or less static React app, but there will be key, for example, display arbitrary field widgets on a node edit, form, so that you can still, like, say, add a map field to your content type and it will show up you having to write any code. And so you can, for example, enable a module and have a new route kind of be registered with React app, that kind of code. There's going to be an interim step at which, in order to test out the new admin UI, you have to run npm and such, like whenever you. But we're taking a good look at what WordPress Gutenberg is doing, because they have figured out how to do this kind of well-defined extension points without tools. So in the longer-term vision, we want to get there, but in the short-term vision, we're trying to, like, build this in a way that facilitates flow, and then we'll sort of figure out how to wrap it properly later on. We didn't want to, like, drill down on that too much and lose sight of what we're trying to actually do, which is make Drupal much easier, delightful user experience. So that's that. The next big sprint we have coming up is at Dev Days, which is in like 3 weeks, I think. It's like the beginning of July. So there'll be a bunch of people there, and some of the topics they'll be talking about at that sprint include, or we're hoping to have the admin content show it off kind of place, so we can kind of drill in on that, find what we learned and what we didn't learn, that kind of stuff. And also some of the hard architectural issues that we didn't get a chance to talk about at this sprint, like accessibility, translations, release management stuff, like how to handle the fact that React has 6-month major version cycles and we have more like major version cycles, and how to balance those two things, as well as how to actually package the external React application in Drupal as, like, the default admin experience eventually, but in the short term as an experimental feature. So some more figuring out to do. Our aim is by Drupal Europe in September to have a really slick, a V-slick demo, as the team would say, to show off what we're working on. And in the short term, we'll have some great places for new people to get involved. Like, for example, helping with the 7 refresh, taking part in usability studies, digging into the GitHub queue for the React application and parceling some stuff off there, and lots of other things. So that's a very messy overview. Anybody have questions with all of that? I am working on a blog post that says what I just said it in a far more structured and meaningful way. So if anything I said didn't make sense, feel free to move on from there. But yeah, there will be a blog post forthcoming in the next, hopefully, few days or a week, with more of a wrap up. But that's kind of where we're thinking. Questions?
Adam says Drupal is nothing but extensions.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. So what we're going to start with is a basic set of extension points, and then see where people get blocked, and then figure out if there's a way to work around that without opening more extension points, and where there is, then we will be deliberate about it, because the quickest way to make a shitty admin experience is to give module developers full reign over this, that, and the other thing, however they want. It actually is beneficial to the user experience to lay down strong foundational guidelines so that you can't, like, turn the background fuchsia. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see, what that happy middle ground is. I think we're going to start very conservatively, and then gradually find more places where people are like, oh crap, if I can't do X, that's going to be a huge problem. Like, something like Path Auto module.
Yeah, I was thinking about Path Auto as well.
yeah, because it's interesting, because it takes an existing field, which is the path field defined by the path module, and then it overlays its own behavior on top of that, to auto generate a path URL and adds a checkbox, so you can say, I don't want that, let me fill out something else. So there's a perfect example. So one of the ways we've talked about handling that case is allow entire components to be swappable. So what Path Auto would do is swap out Path's component with its own, smart path component or whatever. But it remains to be seen whether that's robust enough to handle all of the various use cases we need.
VPAT.
iterative, gradual approach. That's the main underlying goal of the thing, is not to rip all of the Band-Aids off at once. And like, now in order to build a Drupal site, you need Node.js and you need like all this stuff. Like, that's not the intention.
And you can't extend it, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and you can extend it, and all in the guts every time you use it. Hey, ta-da!
Yeah.
So that's not the intention, but we are trying to like get something out there that people can play with sooner than later, and then work on integrating it and making it Drupal-y as we go on. So
Yeah.
does that make sense?
We're going to start with a more opinionated, small slice of functionality and see where what we run into.
I had a question for you.
Sure.
In our experience, there were 3 areas that kind of deal with all of the topics of the admin UI and user experience. And I don't know at what stage it would be appropriate to delve into more questions around them. And that would be specifically around reporting, data structure, and a third point, which I just forgot. But essentially things that you haven't mentioned. Where in the life cycle of what's going on with the admin UI research would it be appropriate to bring those things up? Because a lot of the problems that we've run into with the admin experience, or I guess the content creator experience, also is a result of how certain data structures exist within Drupal itself.
Can you elaborate your main points? Because I wouldn't be able to tell you right now when topics are appropriate. So let's say they are appropriate now.
Okay. So the easier one to start with is data structure. And I think the simplest example, and there are other ones, but the simplest is Drupal assumes that any content that is generated, it tags it as being author, rather than what it's structurally doing, which is it is a content owner. So when someone creates a node within Drupal, that node that is generated is actually a permissions issue. And so everything is based around the concept of what owns that node as an object. But canonically, the way it's referred to in documentation and in Drupal core and the way everything treats it is as if that's the content author. And because of that, you only ever have a single owner with permission over a node. It kind of like thinking from a file permission perspective. And what that means then is when you try to build either a view to try and act as an ersatz replacement for reporting, or at least real-time reporting, it makes it very awkward for content generators and content editors and people dealing with workflows. So that's the one example.
How is it awkward?
It's awkward because, with content that is typically written, so using magazine generators, for instance, which is different than a blog. A blog post, a piece of content is usually, in most use cases, created by a single, like you have a user, the user creates the content, they own each article that they post to the blog. However, in a newspaper, it's very frequent that you have multiple authors, multiple owners, and multiple editors. So through each stage of content generation, there's a mask of permission versus the mask of ownership of who actually is generating the content within that node, within that container.
Deep, man. So I'm wondering if this is something. Is this a consideration that is tied to whatever we're doing inside React, or is this something that?
And that's the question I'm asking.
Core itself, right? Is this something?
Well, I think the change has to occur within core ultimately, but it has consequences for the types of user interface that gets created.
Yeah.
So like if you want to do reporting and let's just pretend I'm an editor, as in I look at somebody else's content that they've written. So somebody else is entering that information in, but I'm at a stage in a workflow where I'm actually having to manage 15 different articles as a secondary editor. Like I'm massaging the information separately or validating it, because you could have a validation step. Being able to create views that make sense when you look at the way revisioning works gets really crazy. Because we tried to do it and we talked about it for probably 2 years. And there's not a good solution because of how atomic revisioning is. And so the consequence of the highly atomic revisioning is that you can't build in a user interface that identifies stages very well. And so the way workflow works is very different. It's looking at what the current state is rather than being capable of generating a report that says, I have 15 articles that need to go to editing and I need someone to edit them.
I don't know. I feel like that is kind of a cart before the horse problem. We need to, if core ships with such functionality, then this initiative needs to account for it. But I don't feel like inventing new features in core is part of this initiative. I feel like this initiative is about taking what things you can already do in Drupal, core and otherwise, and making it look much nicer as a first step and then act much nicer as a second step. So I think as we would add workflow tools like that to Drupal as part of the workflow initiative or as part of whatever other initiative, this initiative would definitely have to respond to that and make adjustments accordingly. But I don't think it's this initiative's purpose to fundamentally change the workflows and such within Drupal core.
Yeah, it sounds like something on the basically on extending the capability or changing the capabilities on the framework level, right?
I don't actually know if where I think there's change that occur in multiple places, but I guess what I'm trying to find out is at what stage, because of the life cycle of Drupal and how we go through, like we're looking at Drupal 9 already, and that's rapidly approaching. So I don't know where the discussion starts. And in terms of introducing new reporting or new features, I 100% agree that that needs to happen stage 3, stage 4, like way in the future. But the question is, in trying to tackle some of the simple fundamentals of how we think about things and laying the groundwork for those eventual changes. So when you're looking at a UI, if I look at a node and it gets passed to me, am I really the author of that node? But if I become the owner of that node, that has consequences for the UI.
What you might want to do is have a look at ideas queue. I just posted the link in the group chat of this Hangout, and there you'll see maybe not related ideas, but also pretty daunting things like fieldable fields, all the composer things. Yeah, so either deep or very fundamental tools and ideas for core.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's a good place to start this discussion, because I think you're talking about pretty fundamental API level changes that would enable these kinds of new functionality, right?
In terms of when, I think it's like there's no timeline on ideas to be proposed, and I think especially if it's a relatively controversial idea, potentially, that the sooner it gets out there and people have time to mull it over, the better off it's going to be. So I don't think, even though it might get implemented as a phase 4, phase 5, something like that, I think talking about it sooner than later is good. You know, so people can either say, well, that's a great idea. In fact, I'll code it up this weekend, or they can say, well, that's not really good for core. Let's do that in Contriv instead. Or they say something else. You know what I mean? But getting validation on that idea, I think, as a first step would be really good.
Cool. I can definitely follow.
I don't burden this particular initiative with also fix all of the things that are wrong about Drupal. Because like we're stop. But I think taking what is there, because Drupal's already, you know, for better or worse, it's got what it's got. And it is really powerful, but so much of the time we hemorrhage people because they get to Drupal and they just don't not understand what Drupal's for, why you would use it, what the advantages are over anything else. So initiatives like Out of the Box are critical because they tell people within their first 2 minutes of using Drupal, this is why you use it. They're like, oh, wow, okay, I got it. So if we can also revamp the admin experience so that it's like, oh, I get it. This is the structure and this is how I maneuver around it. And this is how I create content. And oh, this is great. I totally understand how this works. Like if we can focus on those problems and really nail that out of the park, then I feel like expanding that to support whatever revamped workflows or philosophies or whatever we want to introduce into Drupal in the future, we can account for that. But I definitely do not want this to be called out on like re-questioning some of those basic fundamentals. Even though that may be necessary from a product point of view, I don't think we want to couple that with this initiative personally.
I think I have I mostly agree, and I'm going to stop talking very, very shortly. But the related idea to all of this was in Drupal 7, one of the key administrative contrib modules that almost every site I built utilized was views bulk operations, VBO.
Yep.
And we took a little bit of that and put it into core and D8, but the administrative or user interface aspects of that continue to be really missing. And I don't know if that does apply in terms of making certain that even if it isn't directly part of what's being created in this initiative, if this initiative leaves room for that to at least be created in contrib, like so that it takes into account leaving it, that it needs to be compatible with those types of things. Because that's, for me, that's been the #1 blocker to anyone I've suggested Drupal to in the past, since Drupal 8, is the absence of being able to make changes to lots of things at once.
Okay, that's an interesting anecdote. Yeah, we know that our filters are super very not nice. I wasn't really aware of that. We actually limited functionality, or VBO in itself is never made it to a Drupal 8 version as a contrib. I don't know what.
It has a stable release as of April 30th, but I've not used it to know if this is the feature.
I've been using it. It works.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, and I have not checked for it in at least 6 months. So if it's out there,
There you go.
Yep.
Maybe that's but yeah, we definitely have very old school clunky filter and bulk changes, user interfaces, and I agree that there are one of the really ugly bits in the UI that I personally would definitely want to improve how we treat those features on our listings. And I think the JavaScript initiative is an ideal playground for stuff like that, because it also matches, it also is relevant for content managers at least, right? Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. Good point. Yeah, ideas queue for far out there philosophical ideas. Find people to discuss them with, and who knows? Thanks, Thomas.
But I think reinforcing some of the importance of like the pieces of the current UI that people use a lot of, such as bulk operations, and making sure we have a good plan for those is also important too. So thanks, Thomas.
Yeah. Hey, Antje, did you have something you want to bring up?
Yeah, I feel like I've talked a lot, so I'm done talking unless anyone else has questions about what I said. Otherwise, I see Antje is here. Did you want to talk about your issue?
Yeah, I have a UI text issue more, which is some people have been working on an issue. Where is it? to reword the there it is. Reword user cancellation form buttons. Because currently, what we have is that when you want to cancel an account, you have a button that says cancel account, and next to it you have a button that says cancel.
Huh.
Because of course, aborting an action, we use the button cancel for it. So there's an issue that's number 1649286, where there has been lots of going back and forward about how to reword this. And at some stage, the proposal was to call the cancel button abort, which would be completely different than everywhere else. So there's currently a proposal to actually change this to apply changes and cancel. But then we end up with a knock-on effect of saying, are you sure you want to cancel these user accounts? We then have apply changes or cancel, which again is confusing. And while I was looking deeper into that, I realized that when a user cancels their account, they don't know whether they're disabling it or whether they're deleting it. And I think there we are now in breach of the GDPR. So what started as a simple issue on a button might actually have something that we need to look in deeper in. How can we tell users what's actually happening when they cancel an account? So there's basically three things rolled together at the moment. One is the buttons on the actual form. One is the question of whether we should reword the whole mentioning of cancellation. And the third one is, are we giving enough information to users? And somebody helpfully...
My hot take on is that I haven't ever heard anyone, apart from this one instance, being confused about what cancel means. So I would advocate not redoing all cancels on all other forms. The mock-up that's in the proposed resolution.
Not on all other forms, only on the form where you cancel a user account. Yeah. Because they're the actual
I'm saying
says cancel.
Yeah, I would not break the pattern. I would do what makes sense to me, which is change the name of the submit button here.
Yeah.
To be applied changes or whatever. That seems like a good approach. That does introducing a new pattern here. It'd be one thing if cancel was known to cause problems with people all over the place, then that would be a reason.
No, it's just for that one.
Everywhere. Yeah, so I think that that's fine. The GDPR thing, though, I mean, it does say there's a difference between disable and delete there. So could you drill in on that a little bit?
If the user doesn't have the permission to select their way of cancellation, like if I delete an account for somebody, then as an administrator, I see those three different options. But if a user cancels their own account, there's a possibility that they just see, do you want to cancel your account? And you can confirm that. You don't know whether it's deleting or disabling, because you can't choose between that.
Right. Okay.
That's a separate permission we have. So we end up...
Yeah, that's definitely... Yeah, probably not as part of this. Anyway, that was my... else have a hot take?
Yeah, I mean, if we can find a way of showing what the default option is that has been chosen to the user, and say, actually, if you really want to have it deleted, contact the site moderators. That could be one way out of it.
I think I agree with what Angie said. So we would start with finding the right label for the submit button, and because we configure what actually happens, yeah, maybe I guess we show a confirmation screen. Are you sure?
Yeah, it's just the are you sure needs to actually
And then the are you sure can be extended with our site will we will cancel your account but keep your content around. If you're not happy with that, do XYZ.
Something like that, yeah.
Because then we would need to, customize the message on the confirmation screen to summarize what actually happens when canceling. And then, there's probably a couple of scenarios there, and then we can see what we can do inside core, right? To do it as correctly as possible, and then whatever overrides or we need to offer, as in forms that people can fill out to add whatever custom messaging people think they need to add there.
Okay, yeah.
I think that's that's the first thing I would come up with. So maybe not necessarily the right idea, but and I think it would be a different issue.
Yeah, I can make that in a different issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody pointed me
that got a lot of.
Sorry, what's that, Angela?
Angie?
You said something, but it was not understandable.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I accidentally talked over you. I'm really sorry. I was just saying, like, separate issue for those concerns makes sense, because that is probably a gnarly, twisted path with lots of nooks and crannies. And this is a very straightforward improvement. And it would be great to get, like, when little changes like this reach comments, I start to get pretty nervous. It's like, why is that so hard? You know, we want to get this one put away as quick as possible, I think, and then that the other one might get to 100 comments. I don't know, but let's not combine the two.
Yeah. Okay, then I comment on the other issue.
Samuel suggests in the chat sidebar here that there's a GDPR module that we might lift some features from.
Okay.
I don't know if it fixes this specific thing, but I've heard it's quite comprehensive in addressing a ton of concerns. So that's not a solution to this problem, but maybe there can be a long-term thing in core where we could just have GDPR compliant default.
Do you have an issue number for that?
Nope, it's a hypothetical issue, but I can make it.
Can you make an issue for the hypothetical issue?
Yes.
That would be great.
GDPR module in the meantime, I would say.
Yeah, no, it would be great to have a place to put them together. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, /project/GDPR is at least the very obvious URL for the GDPR content module.
Okay, I'll comment on that as well. Oh no, it's a module.
Yeah, it's not an issue. It's on the concept module. So.
Okay, great.
So maybe it's an idea, maybe it's a core feature request, but actually it might make sense to maybe start this as an idea and figure out all the gnarly, because it's probably not super straightforward to figure out the different scenarios and what we even can sensibly cover inside core as and what defaults we can even ship with. Etc.
And there's things in GDPR that American companies also don't want to do. So we would have to set boundaries, but I can make the issue after this call.
Thank you.
It'd also be good to look at what other projects are doing, like WordPress. I guess I found this out at Front End United. They just shipped a release with GDPR support that does a thing like dynamically building a privacy policy based on like sort of like a registry hook kind of thing, where modules can say like I store data in this way and I do this, and so anyway, it's a way for modules to all tell the thing what it is that they do that relates to privacy, and then for that all to be spat out on a page somewhere. So that's, another. I don't know anything about that or GDPR module, but it'd be good in that idea to be looking at how various other platforms also tackle this issue.
There's like a whole issue. I'll post it in the Slack.
Thank you.
I was gonna say I'd be surprised the first time this is coming up, but yeah, if it's not, then yeah, that'd be wonderful. Thanks a lot, Sam.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Well, with that, although we started a couple of minutes later, we're at time, I think. So, any final thoughts? Otherwise, we'll continue with our days and look forward to a blog post about Frontend United and the JavaScript Initiative team. And Adam and Sam may bug Christina and me after we've posted after Christina has posted the media library final extra final plus design.
Already posted it.
Okay, great. Find us if you have any questions. Well, thanks for now.
Okay, bye. Thanks.
Bye, Al.
Thank you.
You.
Bye, everyone.